Ladies, you'll end up shopping for your guy's deodorant, right? So try Degree's Original Cool Rush. You see, last year, Degree changed the formula, and men were mad. One guy even started a petition. So Degree admitted they messed up and brought the Original Cool Rush scent back. It's clean, crisp, and actually smells like someone you want to cuddle. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So toss one in your cart and find out why it's the best-selling men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my co-host, Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party, and our good friend, Eric Levine, the unofficial co-host of this show. Eric is a noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. So I want to start off this conversation. I want to talk about three topics to begin with today. I want to talk about the case for Donald Trump. I want to talk about the case for Kamala Harris. And I want to talk about, fundamentally, the shamelessness of CBS, the New York Times, other media, gaslighting the American people about the characters and the issues as we face what I believe to be the most important election in our lifetime. What we need in the media is we need truth, we need honesty, we need integrity, and we are not getting it, gentlemen. But let's begin with the case for Donald Trump. So let me submit to you my opinion, then we'll go to Eric, then to Jesse. The case for Donald Trump was, to me, very simple. What did he do when he was president? What is his record? Does he have an unfortunate personality, as my mother used to say? Perhaps. But I will say to you, he was an excellent president. He did good work to protect our borders. He did good work on the economy. The inflation was low. There were no major wars going on, which were created by the ineptitude and the weakness of the Biden-Harris administration. He kept in check all the crazy foreign policy and cultural war issues of Obama, and then he gets defeated. And then Biden comes in, and he says he's going to be the great unifier. Trump divided the country. I'm going to unite it. I submit to you that Obama and Biden-Harris are the most divisive people we've had around the White House in decades and decades and decades. Truly detrimental. So if you don't like Trump, hold your nose, vote for him, I respectfully submit, because Donald Trump was an effective president. Now, the case for Kamala Harris, well, I want to be respectful. She has a wonderful resume on paper. In real life, she's not so good. What does she stand for? Nobody knows, because she's a chameleon. She says and does anything that makes her the opportunist of our time. She's not an intellectual heavyweight by any means. She is somebody who can't put thoughts together or sentences together and has no commitment to any policy other than getting elected. She's hostile to a strong U.S. in terms of foreign policy. She's hostile to the anti-Semitic attacks going on in the United States. She's hostile to the state of Israel. She doesn't understand we're fighting for Western civilization. What's the case for her? Well, if you like the progressives and you like the way the country is going, and if you think the economy is just fine, and if you think illegal migrants should be legalized, and if you think the world is at peace and we have no threat of a breakout of major conflict between the axis of evil and Western civilization, by all means, you vote for her, because that's the case for Kamala Harris. If you want to vote that way because you just can't stand Trump, and that's the biggest reason people will vote for her, because nobody knows who she is and what she stands for, then vote for her. But don't complain when the world becomes unraveled and the United States becomes unraveled. Eric.
Well, let's remember when Kamala Harris, to this day, has still not gotten a single vote in her run for president. When she ran for president in 2020, she dropped out before the first primary. And when she this time around, she was anointed after they kicked Joe Biden to the curb. And there was a lot of talk, maybe we can have a compressed primary system. We can have some sort of election to see who our nominee would be. But the Harris folks were able to put in place a process by which she was just anointed. To this moment, she has still not gotten a single delegate vote, or no one. Let's put it this way: no one in the American public has voted for a delegate to vote for her for president, because of course, all the delegates at the convention ultimately voted for her, but they went there as Biden delegates, and because she was anointed rather than was forced to run, she was never put in a position of having to say, "This is what I stand for. This is my platform. This is what I want to do," and then have an adversary or an opponent say, well, that's not a good idea. I would do this, or I would do this better. And that's how you vet candidates. And that's how you find out what they stand for. And that's how they make the case for themselves. She was never put into the position of having to make a case for herself. And that's why when she's asked so frequently about what her position is on a particular issue, you either get a word salad that makes absolutely no sense, or you get some platitude that is equally incomprehensible. For instance, she's in favor of an opportunity economy. Don't ask her what that means, because she can't drill down beyond that. But to the extent she gives you any explanation, her idea of an opportunity economy is all about redistribution of wealth. There are two approaches to wealth in a worldview. There's those of us who believe that a pie is so big, the goal is to make it larger so everybody gets wealthier. That's called equal opportunity. That's called entrepreneurship. That's called capitalism. That's called the American approach. And then there's the redistribution of wealth approach. There's the view that the pie is so large, it can't get any larger. So what we need to do is to have equity. So we have to take what this group has and give it to this other group. And that generally requires, of course, coercion. But that's ultimately the difference between equity and equality. But her opportunity economy is basically this concept of equity. And of course, incorporated in all of that is the social justice movement, diversity, equity, inclusion. Everybody's viewed through the lens of race and gender. It's inherently racist and anti-Semitic. But from that, in order to have these equal results, these historically, quote unquote, historically oppressed peoples have to take from the quote-unquote historically privileged people so that everybody ends up in the same place. So that's really the case, that she's attempting to run as a centrist by using these words that sound benign or sound, encouraging, make you feel good, nice, it's opportunity for everyone. But when you drill down, or when you not even drill down, you just scratch the surface, you really learn that this is all about redistribution of wealth. That is, in essence, her economic policy. And what's her foreign policy? You look at the failures of Joe Biden, and it's just been, from beginning to end, it's just been one colossal failure, beginning with the catastrophic surrender in Afghanistan. And this was in large part because Joe Biden recognized that the ascendant part of the Democratic Party was the progressive left, and he wanted to appease it. He wanted to keep them happy, because that's where the power base of the party was going. The difference between Biden and Harris is that while Joe Biden wanted to appease that wing of the party, Kamala Harris is from that wing of the party. She's of that wing of the party. She believes that garbage. It's not so much that she's appeasing that wing of the party. She believes this nonsense. She believes that projecting American power abroad is a bad thing, because America is a systemically racist, evil country. And if you project American power abroad, you're projecting that same evilness abroad. And we have to stop that. We have to bring everybody home. So that is really the case for Kamala Harris, but she didn't have people didn't really have the opportunity to challenge her, because the Democrats adopted the Soviet-style approach of, this is who we're going to pick, and the people will follow us, and the people will love us, rather than the Democratic approach with a small d, that the people get to elect their leaders. No one elected Kamala Harris other than Barack Obama and the other elitists in the Democratic
Pelosi and Schumer.
Right, the elitists of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is big on calling Republicans elitists, but they are the most elite party of all time. You say Schumer and Pelosi and Obama, but who else contributes to this group? It's the elites. It's the Los Angeles, Hollywood crowd. Some of the wealthiest people on the planet, the most privileged people on the planet. But yet, and still, they accused Donald Trump of being this evil guy, being this threat to democracy. And I'm not going to justify January 6th. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It was not a legitimate form of protest. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. But the fact that Donald Trump did something wrong does not mean that there is a case for Kamala Harris. And there is no case for Kamala Harris. She is an utter incompetent. And the more she speaks, the more the American people are coming to that conclusion. And the way you know that is that every poll you look at in the last week to 10 days shows Donald Trump ascendant and her on the decline. I would argue there is no case for Kamala Harris.
Jesse, your turn.
Well, you and Eric, Your Honor, have made the case for or against Kamala Harris. But if you look at this, and I just want to touch on one issue before we go on to other things. Number one, I think that when we saw those people who are Trump haters, I think you really truly need to separate them into two groups. And you both have touched upon them. One group is they just do not like his conduct, his mean tweets, the way he approaches in a very candid, direct manner. His style is not for them. And maybe they don't feel that it's presidential. The other side of that same side of the coin is the establishment, the elitists, big tech, big corporations, that they view Trump as a disruptor, someone that is going to upset their apple cart, someone that's going to disrupt their ability to maintain their profits, maintain their control, maintain their influence. And here, when I say about the Democrat power brokers in Washington and in other state houses throughout the country, the ultra-left progressives, is their greed. That's the group of individuals that do not want to see a Trump presidency because it's not a conformist type of presidency. Look at, where you looked. It used to be years that presidents, Republican or Democrat, and Republican members of Congress in both chambers would support free trade agreements like NAFTA. That basically, in essence, gutted a lot of our manufacturing industry here in the United States, specifically that in the auto industry. It was Trump who changed that. Trump who changed also the use of tariffs. We can agree or disagree on the approach on the tariffs, but one of the things we can agree on is that while maybe there was a short-term hiccup or flattening of the economy, it did help out on a multitude of levels, economically and on a foreign policy point of view. Now, the case for both these individuals. This is one of those unique opportunities that the American people have where they can compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You compare the 4 years of Donald Trump, where we were domestically, economically, from a national security point of view, and foreign policy, to that of Harris and Biden. And all you have to do is let's just look at home, more importantly, because you two are far more eloquent and articulate and informed on the international issues. But here domestically, in terms of the economy, from the Trump administration to the Biden and Harris administration, prices for the middle-class Americans and their families and businesses are up 20%. Wages in the same period of time, comparably between the Trump administration and the Harris-Biden administration, is down 3%. 70% of the American people say the economy is worse off than it's ever been. Half of the Americans consider themselves broke. And 2/3 of American middle-class families say and agree with the statement, we're falling behind due to the high cost of living.
Well, by the way,
Jesse,
how about what happens if the Trump tax cuts expire? What does that mean to people?
Exactly. That is where now we're going to have the government sucking in more money. And you know what? There was one opportunity component or two opportunity components of the opportunity economy that Kamala Harris spoke about. One was her price controlling, using the government to price control. That was her answer to inflation, which we've seen in the 1970s fail. The other one
well, you saw it fail in the Soviet Union and Cuba also. So
exactly.
It never works.
It's failed every time it's ever been tried.
Yes. And then the other one was, hey, let's tax you on gains and revenues and that you have not even cashed in on. So we're going to do a capital gains increase in the capital gains tax, which means that if we have a home and you buy it and that home goes up in value, you're going to be taxed on it. You're going to have to take a loan out, go into debt.
You mean if the property value goes up?
Exactly.
The IRS guys, the 87,000 people that they pushed through.
Yes, and I believe that
to
Trump
police
is
against
right
us. Right.
When we should take those 87,000 people in the IRS and let's turn them into border agents, because that is what's critically important. I do believe that there's a clear distinction and there's a clear difference. The cases can be made for both candidates. One's an utter failure. One is a threat to democracy and the product of a Soviet-style a nomination and ascendancy. The other one, while maybe flawed and maybe his style could be questioned, his policies served this country. They served the people. They served small businesses.
Well, the one issue that we have to be honest about that Kamala Harris has a distinct advantage on is the issue of abortion. And basically, that's really all she's running on at this point.
No, she has two so-called issues.
Well, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and abortion. Right.
Okay.
But the abortion one really resonates. And I mean, I happen to be a pro-choice Republican, and I think Republicans really need to rethink how they approach the issue of abortion. That we're getting better. I think Trump actually, in the debate, had the better of the argument on the issue of abortion.
And certainly Vance did in his debate.
Well, right. That gets us to Tim Walz. Tim
Walz.
That guy's a pathological liar. But let me just finish the thought on abortion. So, but the point has to be made. Okay, let's assume the Democrats are 100% right on the issue of abortion, and I think there should be limits on it. I don't believe in late-term partial birth abortions, but I agree with the concept that it should be left to the states. Whatever they decide. But is it really just one issue? I mean, the answer to the rejoinder to the Democrats on the issue of abortion is, okay, even if I agree with you, is that all there is? Is that the only? Does not national security matter? Does anti-Semitism on our campus matter? Does the destruction of crime in our streets matter? Does the border matter? Does inflation matter? Don't give me this price gouging stuff. I still haven't heard her mention a business that's engaged in any price gouging. But none of these issues matter. It's just all about abortion. That's the only thing we should be voting on. But that seems to be.
That's their mantra.
That's their mantra. And then the other message that you point out, we've kind of touched on before, is Donald Trump's a bad guy. We hate him, so vote for me. That's
some campaign.
That's the case for Kamala Harris.
Well, but you mentioned something very interesting. You said Tim Walz. So let me submit to you and to Jesse the following proposition.
He's a pathological liar.
He's a pathological liar. They dressed him up. They thought he was Mr. Rogers or Robert Young, and Father Knows Best. He was a nice, kind of cute guy from the Midwest, and he was going to bring back all the deer hunters and all the tough guys. Look, the fact of the matter is the man's a total fraud. He's an empty suit. She's an empty pantsuit. He's an empty suit. And what does he stand for? He said that when they were riding in the streets of Minneapolis, and his wife was saying she kept the windows open because she wanted to remember this joyous time when the people rose up, he stopped the cops and the National Guard from protecting the city. And they had hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of damage, and people lost their lives, and people were hurt.
And lost their business.
And the man's a socialist. And the man has very suspect relationships to China. So let me just say to you, in the ordinary course, nobody cares who the vice president is. But this is an example where you should care who the vice president is, because he's one heartbeat away from the presidency. So you have an empty suit for the presidential candidate. You have an empty suit for vice presidential candidate. This is the leader of the free world. This is the one who has to manage the economy so it's strong, so it can protect us against the axis of evil and these totalitarian powers. Give me a break. Let's grow up and think about what's important. Abortion, that's fine. You have a difference of opinion on abortion. You're going to be happier when your daughters and your wives are raped by illegal migrants with criminal records because they haven't been vetted by the administration. That'll make you happy, but you have a right to an abortion, but you don't have a right to life? I mean, what is wrong with these people? I just am totally perplexed by this.
Well, you talk about why Tim Walz was picked. Pennsylvania is by far and away the single most important state in this election. I believe that whoever wins Pennsylvania will be the next president. Josh Shapiro is an extraordinarily popular Democratic governor of Pennsylvania. She skipped over Shapiro to pick Walz, and I think it's reasonable to believe that the reason she did that is because Josh Shapiro is Jewish, And the progressive wing of the Democratic Party doesn't like Jews, plain and simple. He's pro-Israel. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party does not like Israel, plain and simple. And it's the same reason why she won't condemn the protests on the college campuses calling for the destruction of the state of Israel and the extermination of the Jews. But she needed a white guy. So Waltz was the default after she refused to pick Shapiro, and I think in large part because he's Jewish.
All right, we have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us for more important and interesting conversation in our next segment.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves
Just a little further. You got this.
that we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like wind in your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes!
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz, spritz.
Spritz, spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back.
Use as directed.
Experience a progressive lens engineered with AI from Essilor, powered by individual measurements of your visual behavior. A lens personalized to you by an Essilor expert. Discover Verilux XR Track and enjoy instantly sharp vision in motion and seamless transitions from near to far. Find your local Essilor expert today at Essilor.com.
Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii and sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Party. Eric Levine is with us, our wonderful guest and unofficial co-host of Let the Record Show with Chairman Garcia and myself. Eric is a noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, gentlemen, we've had this series of episodes about the shamelessness of the media. I'm particularly talking about the New York Times and CBS. What are they doing? They're gaslighting the American people in this election, which really is the most important election in a lifetime, in my humble opinion. We need honesty. We need integrity. We need truth from our media. We're not getting it. They're protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, but we're not getting honest journalism. What do I mean by that? Well, CBS has the following. It has an interview of somebody who's an anti-Semitic writer, a so-called academic, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, and he's confronted in a hard-hitting, fair journalistic interview, and they make this guy, they beat him down, and they make him go on an apology tour after he's done this. Imagine that. He does his job as a journalist, and the people in the newsroom are embarrassed by him because he didn't amen this anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas.
Ta-Nehisi Coates interview.
Right. It was terrible, just terrible. So what else do? They get Kamala word salad Harris for an interview, and she can't come up with coherent thoughts or sentences. So they edited it out, and they reconfigure the interview as if there was a question and a response. But that's not what happened.
But the stupidest thing is that they actually aired first her original response.
Yeah, in the advertisements.
Yes, in the advertisements. And then so it made it so palpably obvious what they had done.
Yeah, so it's obvious, it's clear, the bias is manifest. And they also had a voiceover from the person, Whitaker, who gave the interview, conducted the interview, explaining what she said. So she needed a translator. Okay, what else? Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson, United States House of Representatives, goes on the air. He's interviewed. And
by Radich.
And what was that, 60 Minutes?
No, the 60 Minutes was the...
ABC. It was Face the Nation.
Right, this was Face the Nation.
Okay. Oh, forgive me. Hey, Face the Nation, CBS. Right? Face the Nation, CBS.
Well, whatever station Radich was on. I believe.
Radich. So what do they do there? They ask him a question, and they edit out most of the intelligent part of his response. So again, you have a Q&A, a question and an answer, and what do? They protect Harris against her foolishness and her nonsense, and they take out the best part of his response for a complete and truthful articulation of his policy. This is shameful. Now, what does the New York Times do? They endorse Harris for the presidency of the United States. Okay, they're entitled to do that. They haven't endorsed a Republican for president since 1956.
Eisenhower.
Okay? Eisenhower. So that's swell. You want to endorse? So make the case for Kamala Harris. You know what the case for her was? Not that she's accomplished anything. Not that she has good policy points of view, which she wants to bring forward. No. She's a patriot. What does that mean? It's a self-serving statement that doesn't get to the truth of the matter, that this is a woman without ability, experience, vision. She's a patriot. That's kind of like
there are
Obama's, hopey and changey nonsense.
Well, there are 335 million people in America. I would venture to say that 90% of them are patriots. So I don't know what that means.
Right. I mean, what does it mean? She's a patriot. And I'm not even sure, in terms of my view of what American institutions and values are, that she supports American values and institutions. But I'll push that aside. So she's a patriot. So I commend Jared for saying most of us, 95% of us, are patriots. But she has no qualifications for this office. She has no qualifications to be the leader of the free world. So, Eric, what do you think about the shamelessness of the media?
It's disgusting. But I think it's coming back to bite them in the tuchus. I think people are seeing this, and I think it's more than coincidental that you're starting to see Trump rise in the polls and Harris go down in the polls as these very blatant pieces of bias by the media are becoming more and more obvious. Basically, journalistic ethics are defined by one thing today. It's, can we get Trump? Can we stop Trump? Anything we need to do to stop Trump, we'll do. And that defines journalistic ethics. But in fairness to them, it's not just focused on Trump. Well, remember what they did to Mitt Romney. So, and Mitt Romney was a moderate Republican by any definition, but he was painted by the Democrats,
as
Harry Reid, some right-wing lunatic. And the media went along with it. They were more than happy to attack Romney and his character and say all kinds of untruthful things to help Obama. Same thing with John McCain. John McCain was a maverick. We love John McCain. He's this lone Republican. He thinks for himself.
Until he ran against Obama.
Until he ran against Obama. Then they were talking about his mental instability. He was mentally ill. We have to worry about when he was in prison as a POW. Maybe it impacted him, and he's incompetent on economics. So it isn't just particular to Trump. It didn't just start with Trump, although I have to say I think as it relates to Trump, it is gone into a hyperdrive, supersonic mode that we hadn't seen before. But they did the same thing with George W. Bush. Remember Dan Rather came out with a story just before the election that claiming that Bush got some sort of special deferment so he wouldn't have to serve in the military. And then it later came out that it was a complete hoax. And even worse, not only was it a complete hoax, rather at the time that he aired it, knew it was a hoax, admitted he knew it was a hoax, but said he was going to run it anyway because it comported with his view of who George W. Bush was. But the media is just lined up. It's become an adjunct of the Democratic Party. They want to do anything they can to stop the Republican Party. Fairness really has no role anymore in the media. And that's what we're seeing. But I think there's a reason why people's opinions of the media are really, really low and no one really pays attention to them anymore. But Trump's ascendant, Harris is declining. And I think that's in part because people are reacting to the contempt of the press.
Jesse.
I completely agree. I mean, trust in the media is at an all-time low. I think that, polling shows that less than 40% of the American people believe in trust the media. And what's unfortunate about that is that's what feeds and breeds conspiracy theories. And I really, truly do believe that they want, and I mean, these media outlets want chaos. I believe in there's an old adage, I think even from the New York Post, if it bleeds, it leads. Here, if there's chaos and, issues of discontent, that's what gets them ratings. But you both have identified two major issues just recently. But it has been like this for a very long time, from Richard Nixon right through even the Reagan presidency for a period of time. Remember, a lot of the same language that was used about Reagan in 1980 was used about Trump in 2016.
That's exactly right, Jesse. I remember that.
And so if you look at that, I truly do believe that the American people, maybe this is the one good thing about social media and other alternative outlets. Because last week we had John Chachis, the owner of Gumps in San Francisco, on. We talked a little bit about this. And he spoke about how the broadcast networks, they need to be held to the feet to the fire at the FCC. They have a license. They have the ability to use the free airways to communicate. But one of the things that I think is good, and we're seeing the result of this, I think part of it is social media, but I think it's other outlets. Maybe it's CNBC, certainly Fox News. I believe also it's outlets like Newsmax. Is that
and WABC Radio AM
and WABC Radio?
Prime
thank you so
among
much.
them.
I didn't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but thank you so much for doing that. But they're calling out these discrepancies. They're calling out these editing. They're calling out and they're showing people the differences between the Kamala Harris interview live as it was put forward versus the edited version that CBS put out on 60 Minutes. It was brilliant, and maybe this is standard. I didn't know that. Speaker Johnson's team had him videotaped it during his interview with Face the Nation, and they were able to show the editing versus the full answers to the point now where Speaker Johnson, who's really distinguished himself as a leader
he's
in the American political system. I have to tell you, there is this calming, forthright, passionate, deliberate public servant in the Speaker's office, in Speaker Johnson. And I got to give him kudos for that on either side of the aisle, even including Republicans in recent times. But he has said, he may be relegated only to do live interviews because the mainstream media is in the bag for Democrats. We know they've always been on this a little bit leftist. We even had NPR, by one of its own editors, call them out. The fact that 97% of the newsroom is liberal to progressive, that there is no shot of getting free stories, a free speech, independent story. You know what? I give credit to CNN. They made the best, and I do believe it was a business decision, when they did the first debate. They could have done what CBS and ABC did during their presidential and vice presidential debates. They could have put their thumb on the scale. They could have jumped in and done fact checking, which we have found out now, and we knew it almost immediately, that they were wrong in their fact checking. They were inaccurate. But when they conducted the first debate, CNN played it as straight as you could, and I believe that they did that for a business decision. They couldn't be far left, they couldn't be far right. They needed to go to the middle, and they put their best foot forward to let the two candidates, at that point it was Biden and Trump, share their visions and agendas for the American people. But right now, when you have 30 30% of the media provides nothing in terms of independent context to help independent voters make a choice. I go back to what I said last week. I love that bumper sticker from 1992. Piss off the media, vote for George Bush. This time, I think we should piss off the media and vote for Donald Trump.
Well said, Jesse. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Please stay with us for our final segment. This week, we're going to have State Senator Anthony Palumbo, a New York State Senator, a senior member of the leadership in the state legislature, the state Senate. He's from District 1 out on Long Island, and we're talking to him about the important issues that are facing New York and why it's so essential that you have checks and balances in our system of government, and you do not have supermajorities of one party, in this case, the Democratic Party, in New York State. So please stay with us. We'll be back with Senator Palumbo in just a few moments.
This is Let the Record Show.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
5 immersive worlds, 1 amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe opens May 22nd at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Eric Levine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist. Chairman Garcia of the Republican Party had to leave for an important meeting. We welcome to the show, and we're honored and privileged to have him, Senator Anthony Palumbo, State Senator from Long Island. It's District 1, and he's a leader amongst the Republicans in the state legislature and a common sense gentleman. And I'm very happy to have you here, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Judge, and Eric. Good to hear from you. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So, just briefly, just tell our audience, you're in District 1. What does District 1 encompass?
Well, certainly. The first senatorial district is all 5 eastern towns of Long Island and northern Brookhaven to the Smithtown line. So to give you a little bit more of an accurate picture, the Hamptons, which are Southampton Town and East Hampton Town, all the way to Montauk, Shelter Island, which is in between the 2 forks, and then the North Fork, which is Southold and Riverhead towns, and you go from really Orient Point along the North Shore all the way out to Stony Brook University. So essentially, Stony Brook is kind of the westernmost part of Brookhaven. So from Stony Brook to Montauk is essentially a very large geographic district, about 340,000 people, comprise the first senatorial district out of the 63 in New York State.
And what's your background, Senator?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Central Brookhaven in Patchogue. I went to Lafayette College, and as I say, about 35 pounds ago, I was an all Patriot League third baseman. And then after college, I worked in the Manhattan DA's office, went to St. John's Law School, graduated St. John's Law School, became an assistant district attorney in Suffolk County. My dad was a Suffolk County homicide detective, so I grew up in a law enforcement family. I was in the DA's office in a major crime bureau, did rapes and robberies and homicides, and then became a trial supervisor for a few years, and then went into private practice for probably around 10 years, a little more than 10 years. And then after realizing after about 16, 17 years, people don't like lawyers, I like to say I got into a new career path and ran for state assembly in 2013. I realized since people don't like lawyers, I apparently didn't get the memo and became someone involved in elected office. But it's an extremely rewarding position, of course. In 2013, and I'd never run for office prior to that, but from 2013 through 2020, I represented the 2nd Assembly District, which is really that whole North Fork and some northern Brookhaven. And then when Senator Laval retired in 2020, he asked me to run, and I picked up the mantle and fortunately won. They're 2-year terms, as you know, so I won in 2020 and 2022, and now I'm seeking a third term in a few weeks.
Great. Well, this is what I want to ask you. When we talk on this show, on Let the Record Show, we're trying to bring truth to the American people and common sense. And I'm the House Democrat, as you know, and Eric is.
But he's the most conservative one here.
And Eric is the House Republican. But I try to be a common sense Democrat, and I know you and Eric and Jesse Garcia are common sense Republicans. But this is my problem. My problem is that the supermajorities in the state legislature have led to very dangerous legislation, which is detrimental to public safety, to the economy, the future of New York State. So in my humble opinion, even though I'm a Democrat, I'm telling all my friends they have to vote. When they vote, they have to vote against this progressive left-wing tilt, which is a threat to our system of government and the viability in New York. It's important that the state legislature has more Republicans, both in the Assembly and in the Senate. What are your thoughts on that, Senator?
Well, sure, and that's a very valid point. When you think about what the current Democratic Party, the Democrats, this isn't your grandmother's Democrat Party. I sued the Senate as the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Committee to just get the Hector LaSalle nomination for Chief Judge. He happened to also be the first Latino nominee for Chief Judge. He's a lifelong Democrat. He's a fantastic judge. And they refused to even get his vote to the floor because they wanted a progressive crazy. Quite frankly, that's who they got in Rowan Wilson, who is now the Chief Judge. So we have now a supermajority, and the reason why that is so dangerous is not only are they veto-proof, they can override the governor, but you have such a large group that even the moderate Democrats in the suburbs, in the Mid-Hudson, on Long Island, even some of them upstate, you can let them off and still have a majority vote to pass this really, really progressive, radical legislation. For example, we lost the majority in the Senate in the 2018 election. So in 2019, we got bail reform. We got discovery reform. Think of this. Discovery reform has been so bad, and not many people highlight that because they just think about bail reform. Alvin Bragg's office last year at a public hearing we had on public protection for the budget. Alvin Bragg, not the most aggressive prosecutor you'll ever meet, right? We know who Alvin Bragg is. His office complained they dismissed just under 50% of the DWI arrests because of technical violations due to discovery reform. So they were actual legitimate arrests. There were cases they should have been able to prosecute, but due to the fact that this legislature is so focused on defendants' rights, they've completely lost sight of the victim and reality and public safety, that is another one of these horrendous policies that has unfortunately made us less safe. So they dismissed them. They just threw them out. And that's just DWI. And this is happening across the board on the prosecution side. I was a prosecutor. As I said, I was in a narcotics bureau. I was in a major crime bureau. I was a boss. I was a supervisor. So this administrative side of it, you have lawyers doing administrative work instead of lawyer work in the DA's office where they could be doing their job. And this is the problem. When you have one-party rule and you have basically, instead of having Republicans and Democrats fighting to meet in the middle, you have progressive New York City, proud Democrat Socialists of America fighting with the liberals to find where the pendulum will swing and land between those two ideologies. So you don't even have anyone near the center who's actually trying to make an argument that is being listened to when it comes to statewide policy. That's the dangerous part, Judge.
Well,
That's really the concern.
Before I turn this over to Eric, I just want to raise one other issue. Well, actually, two issues. One, you have all this Green New Deal legislation, which is just unworkable. So you're not going to be able to have a sufficient supply of energy if the laws that the radical left has pushed through in their secular religion of Green New Deal. So what are you going to do about air conditioning in the summer and heating in the winter? What are you going to do about running all the computers and supplying the hospitals? How are people going to get anywhere when you have electric cars where you don't have sufficient power stations to furnish the electricity for them? And by the way, you need fossil fuels to run electric cars, to have the generation for electricity. So it's ridiculous. That's one. And then the other thing that makes my eyes bleed, my head explode, Senator, is reparations. This legislature run by the radical left wants to now have a commission that they've established for reparations. So we're going to have a divisive piece of legislation where they're going to have hearings and they're going to force people who are not slave owners, because New York was not a slave-owning state, and they're going to be paying reparations if this legislation is vindicated, because the commission will just give them whatever they want. And that's very dangerous, too. Your thoughts on those two issues, and we'll turn over to Eric.
Certainly. Well, I'll start with the second one first. I mean, the reparations is a pander, right? This is something that, how are you going to have any reasonable degree of certainty when you're trying to decide who gets what? I don't know how you can fairly distribute those funds. On my mother's side, and we've traced it back, that it's 8 generations ago, I have some Native American lineage, not Elizabeth Warren style, but
the real deal. The real deal.
Right.
A real 1/64th.
Yeah, right, or less, right? But at the end of the day, should I get reparations? I mean, where does this stop? And so this is clearly a political pander, and it's the New York City machine doing what they want to try and curry favor in an election year. That's one. On the renewable side, on the energy side, we need to smartly and reliably get there. I have more lineal feet of waterfront than any district in the state because of the nature of the east end of Long Island and all the islands and estuaries and shorefront that I have. But what are you going to do in Buffalo when you have 3 feet of snow where the batteries are inefficient? How the heck are you going to charge school buses during the day when they're supposed to be driven and the batteries are cold and inefficient? So these are these lofty, flashy press conferences that Governor Hochul fell right in line. Cuomo would do the same thing, but Hochul is doing it to the nth degree that they're proudly going to seek these incredibly unattainable goals and force it down everyone's throat, regardless of expense, regardless of reliability, and make everyone do it when we don't even have the technology yet. We want to get there, of course, but we're mandating all these things like electric school buses, or mandating, no gas stoves, no 100-foot hookup, all the crazy things that they're saying. And I'm a greenie. I really do think I have a very good environmental record. That's not being an environmentalist. That's absolutely bananas. And when we talk about nuclear energy, that was not in the discussion because all the activists said, oh, no, how dare you do that? It's dangerous. Well, it's not in 2024. And now all of a sudden in this last year, the Climate Council said, well, part of our plan needs to include zero emission, by the way, nuclear energy. So they've come around because they've been shown to be absolutely ridiculous with their attempted goals. And that's really the concern, that we need to do it smartly and reliably and not just have a splashy press conference and press release and expect for it to really just happen when the technology, unfortunately, isn't there yet.
Okay, we're with State Senator Anthony Palumbo of District 1 in the State Senate, a very distinguished member of the State Senate, formerly a member of the State Assembly. Eric, you have some questions for the senator.
Yeah, Senator, thank you for joining us. I think we can all agree on this call that some of the Democratic policies that we've been discussing are kind of insane, and that and you've discussed, I think, pretty thoroughly and persuasively why a supermajority in the Senate is very dangerous with the one-party rule. But there is one-party rule, and I'm just curious if you have any thoughts as to why, with all these bad policies, Republicans are having such a difficulty in winning back. Let's not even talk about the majority in the Senate, winning back enough seats to end the supermajority.
So I think we make some inroads this year. I think the pendulum is swinging back. And, I really do believe that, fortunately on Long Island, and the gentleman you were just speaking to before me, Chairman Jesse Garcia, I've known him. Our fathers were fire commissioners together. I've known him for many, many years. We have a very common sense plan. And that's why out of the 9 senators on Long Island, 7 of us are Republicans, because I think the suburbs get it. The wrinkle is that you've got very effective messaging coming from the Democratic Party on the state level. They have a ton of money. They have a lot more money than us. In 2020, when Ken LaValle left the Senate and I ran, they spent $3.4 million against me. I was outspent 10-1 in a slightly Republican district. Since redistricting, I actually am in a Democrat district. It's like a D2 or 3%, 20,000, roughly 30,000 more maybe Democrats than Republicans. But they were able to really push on the issues because they have so much money. We're a very blue state, very wealthy donors, fund them well. And quite frankly, if we didn't have the Supreme Court Dobbs decision on the abortion issue in 2022, Lee Zeldin is governor. And Lee Zeldin, the fact that he was within 5 or 6 points, and when you know the registration, I'll just repeat it for the listeners real quick, just under 50% registered Democrats in New York State, 23% registered blank, and 22% registered Republicans. So we're third. Governor Hochul should have smoked any Republican candidate by 25, 30 points. But Lee Zeldin was a fantastic legislator, is a great guy. We combined our campaigns. He was my congressman for many years. And in 2014, we ran together when he first took on Tim Bishop. But that's the type of, when you think about how close that was, the amount of the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Democrats who voted for Lee Zeldin because they're sick of it, just barely wasn't enough. So that's really the wrinkle, that we have a registration and a Democratic Party that just blindly votes for the Democrats.
Right.
We've got a little over 30% in the city. How crazy is that?
Eric has an important question that we want to get to, because it's very, very important that the voters understand this issue.
So we want to talk about Proposition.
I got on a roll, Judge. Sorry.
It's okay. We love rolls. Proposition 1, which is going to be on the ballot. Please explain to the listeners what exactly is Proposition 1 and why I think we all agree they should vote no.
Sure. The bottom line, and I know I have to be quick, is that you have to get in the weeds a little bit. But with my lawyer hat on, too, we have a bunch of rights now that are all conflated with each other, or all on equal footing. So if you're a Catholic hospital and you want to exercise your freedom of religion because someone wants to exercise their reproductive rights, according to the Democrats, for an abortion, which are now codified in our Constitution, the Catholic hospital can be forced, in my opinion, to perform an abortion, despite their religious beliefs. If you have a male who wants to identify as a woman, you don't even have to be going through transition therapy. You can just say, I want to play field hockey in high school. The school can and most likely will be sued for discriminating against that boy who wants to play on a girls' field hockey team.
We've been talking to Senator Anthony Palumbo of the 1st Senatorial District out on Long Island. Senator, it's a great privilege and pleasure to have you on the show. On behalf of Eric Levine and myself, we've been delighted to chat with you. I think it's very, very important. We began this segment by saying it's absolutely essential to break the supermajority control by the Democratic Party of the state legislature. Will go a long way by reelecting people like you and electing Republicans to the state Senate to block the progressive, radical agenda of the New York City Democrats. Senator, thank you for being with us today on Let the Record Show.
Terrific. Thanks so much for having me. And that's it. We need to hold our seats and gain a bunch. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. I want to thank our audience for listening once again to Let the Record Show with Chairman Garcia, noted commentator, essayist, attorney Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. And on behalf of Jesse Garcia, I'll say, let's go Yankees, because I want to make this even-handed. And giving my age away, I still miss the Brooklyn Dodgers. God bless you, God bless America, and God bless your families. Talk to you next week.
This is Let the Record Show.